Good morning everyone, this is Mike.
And this is Pauline.
And we start off with the Society news for Friday the 27th of September.
On Tuesday there will be a coffee morning held in support of the Society on Tuesday the 2nd of October at the Post Office in Knighton. All are welcome from 10:30 until 12 noon. The swimming group are swimming this Tuesday, the 2nd of October, in Ryde at the Waterside Pool. The pool is closed to the public whilst the group swims. There are male and female volunteers to help you get in and out of the pool, as well as lifeguards to ensure your safety. To join the dolphins, please call the Society first to notify us of your swimming ability.
On Wednesday, the weekly coffee morning will be held at Millbrook House this Wednesday, the 3rd of October, from 10:30 a.m. There will also be our low vision drop-in between 10 a.m. and 12 noon on Wednesday the 3rd of October, our weekly event to allow you to view and try the low vision equipment we have at the Society without the need for an appointment. The Wednesday social group will be meeting on Wednesday the 3rd of October at 2 p.m. in Millbrook House. The entertainment this week is the Donkey Sanctuary. The group lasts approximately 45 minutes, which is then followed by tea or coffee and cake.
Thursday. The Thursday social group are meeting on Thursday the 4th of October at Millbrook House. The group meets from 10:30 until 2 p.m. You can knit or just have a chat. Then later in the afternoon, volunteers come in and read to the group from different topics.
Any other news? Are you a budding author? This is your chance to have your story published and read by a celebrity. This year's short story writing competition's theme is The Magic of Christmas. Entry forms available from Waterstones in Newport, Dress for Less in Newport, Millbrook House in Newport. For more information, please contact Chris Kane on 52205 or visit our website on www.iwsb.org.uk. Site for Wight takes pleasure in inviting service users to a Site for Wight members forum on Monday the 15th of October from 11 noon till 12:30 p.m. This will be held at Millbrook House and will be followed by a technology discussion from 1 p.m. until 3 p.m. Please send advance questions by the 10th of October 2018 and RSVP for either meetings by phone on 52205 or email inquiries@iwsb.org. Site for Wight would like to apologise to any audio library users in the P030 postcode area. This week, books posted out on Monday the 24th have been returned to us 3 times instead of being delivered to yourselves. Royal Mail can offer no explanation as to why this keeps happening and are investigating. No other postcode area appears to be affected, and hopefully this problem will be resolved promptly. Do you have retinitis pigmentosa, that's RP, or inherited sight loss? If you or anyone you know has a condition called retinitis pigmentosa or inherited sight loss, there is a group that meets the second Monday of every month at Langard Manor at Shanklin from 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. You can find out about the latest research news, source information and support, and also meet with others with the same condition going through the same problems. Refreshments are available. For more information, please contact Colin MacArthur on 07935 747332. Email colinmacarthur@talktalk.net or just turn up. We now move on to the scaffolding news.
And here is a list of known footway obstructions for works including scaffolding, hoarding Also details of skips, cranes and cherry pickers. We are unable to include end dates as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. We start with the Bay and Ventnor area. There is currently scaffolding at the Premier Inn 1-9 Esplanade Sandown, 11A and 11B St John's Road Sandown, the Toymaster 103 High Street Sandown. The scaffolding is up in Albion Road. Sandown Library 119 High Street Sandown, 1 Melville Street Sandown, 117 High Street Sandown, at the corner of Trinity Road and Madeira Road, Ventnor, Boniface Road and into Trinity Road, Ventnor, Clive Barber's, the Jewellers, High Street, Ventnor, Ivy Bank, Marlborough Road, Ventnor, with associated road closure, 7A Spring Hill, Ventnor. There are currently hoardings at the Premier Inn, 1-9 Esplanade, Sandown. In the Cowes area, there is currently scaffolding at 93 High Street, Cowes, behind the hoarding, Cowes Library, Beckford Road, Cowes. Also, it is up in West Hill Road. There is currently a cherry picker at Ventnor Quays, Castle Street, East Cowes. There are currently hoardings at 93 High Street, Cowes. There are new skips at Ruby Cottage, Fellows Road, Cowes, starting from October the 8th.
And the Newport area, there is currently scaffolding at Domino's, 41 St James's Street, Newport, 18 Crocker Street, Newport, Wight Grill, 144 High Street, Newport, Dewson's, Trafalgar Road, Newport, Santander, 26 St James's Street, Newport. Scaffold is also up around the corner in Pyle Street. 6 Lugley Street, Newport. Key Cottage, 12 Key Street, Newport. 44 Key Street, Newport. 20 St Thomas's Square, Newport. 34 Albert Street, Newport. 2 to 8 Carisbrook Road, Newport. And there is currently a cherry picker at 74 Pyle Street, Newport. There are currently skips at 89 White Pit Lane, Newport, Cul-de-sac, Hooks Way, Newport, 38 Highfield Road, Newport. There are new skips at 12 Key Street, Newport from the 8th of October, 38 Victoria Road, Newport from the 22nd of October. And the Ryde area, there is currently scaffolding at My Dentist, 10 and 11 Cross Street, Ryde, Boots, 170 High Street, Ryde, Hills Court, High Street and Newport Street, Ryde, 12 George Street, Ryde, 47 George Street, Ryde, 73 George Street, Ryde, 12A High Street, Ryde, 91 High Street, Ryde. There is currently a cherry picker at 11 Castle Street, Ryde, and there are currently skips at 32 Foreland Road, Bembridge, Blewett's Cottage, Blewett Avenue, Seaview.
And in Wootton there's a skip at 24 Station Road. In the West Wight area there is currently scaffolding at Jojo's, School Green Road, Freshwater, Duo, 86 Avenue Road, Freshwater, and there's currently a skip at the Green, Lynch Lane, Cowbourne. And now for this week's episode of In Touch, which is presented by Peter Wight and produced by Kevin Corr. The week's episode is termed A Legal Judgment for Novartis. For more than a decade, In Touch has covered a controversial tale of 2 treatments. Lucentis and Avastin have both been found to be effective in treating wet age-related macular degeneration, which costs the sight of tens of thousands of people each year. Avastin is vastly cheaper than Lucentis, but it is not licensed for use in the eye. 2 drug companies, Novartis and Bayer, brought a legal action to prevent NHS clinical commissioning groups from using Avastin in people's eyes, but the High Court has found against them, confirming that doctors can prescribe the cheaper drug. We speak to the Managing Director of Novartis Pharmaceuticals in the UK about the decision and about the regulation of drugs which can save sight. And in addition, it's farewell to a brilliant comic mind and a good friend of the programme, Dennis Norden.
Now we move on to the County Press, Friday the 28th of September, and the headlines are No Future for Tunnel and Probe into an Accident on the Chain Ferry. No future for the tunnel. Cold water poured on the latest fixed link scheme. The leaders of the mainland councils covering areas where the proposed Isle of Wight fixed link would emerge have given a chilly reception to the revised route plans which were revealed last week. That's the County Press edition of the 21st of September 2018. Councillor Sean Woodward, leader of Fareham Borough Council, said he could not see a great future for the scheme and there was no money to make it happen anyway. He said, clearly a great deal of thought has gone into this scheme, but there appears to be a $3 billion black hole in the funding and no sign of anyone stepping forward to fill it. It appears to propose a new M27 motorway junction with no support from Highways England or thought for the smart motorway scheme now under construction, which includes the new junction 10. There also appears to be a proposal to dig up the runways at Solent Airport, along with very extensive engineering and tunnelling works in Fareham. I cannot see a great future for the scheme, but would be keen to reserve final judgment until I have read the long-awaited ARUP viability study. Gosport Borough Council leader, Councillor Mark Hook, took the County Council attempts to find out more detail about the proposals had not proved fruitful, and it was unclear which company or organisation would be taking the project forward. Councillor Stephen Philpott, Chairman of the Gosport Borough Council's Economic Board, has previously stated there was no evidence to find a fixed link would be of any benefit to the residents of his town or central southern Hampshire as a whole. Southampton City Council also questioned how the project would be funded. The No Fixed Link group said this week the most recent proposals revealed last week were highly flawed. Spokesman Stuart Brown said they appear to be proposing a PPI 2/3 privately funded and 1/3 publicly funded project.
And the heading is Probe into Accident on Chain Ferry. A massive rescue operation was launched at the Cowes floating bridge on Wednesday after a crew member was involved in an accident in the engine room. Coastguards, the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service and paramedics worked to lift the unconscious 37-year-old man from below deck using a spinal board. He was then airlifted to Southampton General Hospital. The floating bridge was taken out of service and a launch service provided. Yesterday, Thursday, the Isle of Wight Council said investigations into the accident were continuing, involving engineers from Mainstay, the company which built the vessel, as well as council staff. The spokesman could not say when the bridge would be back in service at the time of going to press. The heading is Car Plunges Over Steep Drop. A Ventnor woman had a lucky escape when her VW Beetle crashed through railings in Ventnor and landed in bushes several feet below. Police are appealing for witnesses after the driver, a 29-year-old, was taken to hospital for observations following the incident at Belgrave Road on Tuesday night. On Wednesday morning, a team from Stag Lane Motors completed a tricky recovery of the vehicle from an area between Belgrave Road and Ventnor Esplanade.
Moving quickly back onto the public to fund a study, referring to the tunnel. Public to fund study, a crowdfunding campaign for tunnel feasibility investigation. A crowdfunding campaign is to be launched to raise £100,000 for a viability study into potential fixed links. Islanders are being asked to contribute their attempts to secure local authority or government finance were unsuccessful. ProLink announced today they have enlisted ARUP to carry out an initial viability study. The process will require a steering group to ensure due diligence and impartiality, and ProLink said the Isle of Wight Council had nominated Councillor Ian Ward, Cabinet Member for Transport, whose responsibilities include the floating bridge and the Highways PFI, to oversee the study. However, following an inquiry by the Isle of Wight County Press, the Isle of Wight Council said Councillor Ward had not been asked or had agreed to oversee any study, although he had been in further contact with ProLink since the last statement on the matter in September 2017. ProLink said relevant mainland authorities would also be asked to become involved within the steering group. ProLink has sought funding for the viability study for several avenues without any success. These include Red Funnel Group, with an offer for them to fund the study, which, if it met with a negative outcome, would allow both Wight Link and Red Funnel to continue business unencumbered by ProLink. ProLink said, having exhausted the normal avenues of funding for such a study, it now has come to the stage where crowdfunding is necessary. We find it bizarre that a project with such potentiality, hugely social, health and economic benefits to the whole Solent region should be funded through crowdfunding by the public and not local or central government. However, such is the power and control exerted over the authorities by the unregulated gatekeepers of the Solent, it appears this is now the only way to pay for the study. They are seeking £100,000 in donations from the public. The purpose of the study is to identify any red flag issues in relation to the development and delivery of the proposed fixed link. To find out more about the project and the crowdfunding campaign, go to solent-freedomtunnel.co.uk.
And this article begins with a question. Umbrella tree spared from Isle of Wight Council Acts. It's an article by David Newball. The landmark umbrella tree in East Cowes could be saved after all. At a town council meeting last Thursday, residents broke into spontaneous applause when an independent report commissioned by the council stated the tree could last another 25 years if remedial work was done to prop it up. The tree was planted more than 100 years ago by Queen Victoria's road manager, along with an identical tree which was planted in Cowes. The Cowes tree on Prince's Green was felled after it became diseased, and the East Cowes tree was also under threat because it suffered from a fungal infection. The infection was identified in a report commissioned by the island's Highways PFI contractor, Island Roads. However, residents questioned the validity of the report, and town councillors commissioned a further independent survey to see once and for all if the tree could be saved. A petition to save the tree attracted 1,277 signatures, with a further 852 people signing the petition online. Dame Judy Dench and wildlife campaigner Chris Packham also called for the tree to be saved. During the meeting, the independent report confirmed the tree was suffering from a fungal infection, but it could be supported if a metal new framework was built around it. Councillor Carl Love cautioned the decision to retain the tree still remained with Island Roads and the Isle of Wight Council. However, he said, I now believe we have a strong case to retain it.
There's been a ferry incident in the fog. Yachts were left adrift yesterday, which is Thursday, after a Red Funnel car ferry ploughed through moorings and collided with a yacht. Red Eagle, which left East Cowes at 5:30 a.m, came into contact with the small yacht moored in the Cowes fairway. Cowes RNLI and Calshot RNLI searched for the yacht in the thick fog for more than an hour after the collision. A spokesperson for Cowes RNLI said, "The car ferry ploughed through the moorings of a catamaran and several Daring-class yachts in Cowes Harbour. The post indicating the small vessel channel was also left at an angle. There was probably less than 50 metres of visibility at the time of the incident and during the search. Mooring ropes were cut through and the 30-foot catamaran owned by the vicar of St Mary's Church, the Reverend Andrew Pope, had been pushed from its moorings onto another. 2 yachts were recovered from outside the harbour," a Red Funnel spokesman said. "There were no crew aboard the yacht and no one was injured on the ferry, which was undamaged. Some ferries were cancelled and the incident is under investigation."
Group closes after 18 years. Sandown Community Partnership has disbanded after 18 years. Members said the body had brought investment of more than £600,000 into the town, but had disbanded after they claimed many unsubstantiated adverse comments were made against it. In a statement, past chairman Gary Young said, "As the Town Council takes on more responsibility from the Isle of Wight Council, the partnership is no longer needed. Now the new Sandown Association has been formed, we hope they will bring new ideas forward and we wish them all success." He added, "All financial commitments to Sandown Town Council have been honoured and any remaining money will, according to their terms of reference, be donated to a local charity." As previously reported, the partnership's role in the building of the town's junior skate park has been questioned. The skate park was branded unsafe following a damning inspection report and now looks likely to be dismantled before it is even opened.
Drug and alcohol service run down. The Isle of Wight NHS Trust has been accused of running the island's drug and alcohol service into the ground and failing hundreds of people with substance abuse problems. Unable to cope with increasing demand and staff shortages, the Trust announced last week it intended to outsource the Island Recovery Integrated Service, that's IRIS, to another provider. Staff have slammed the Trust's failure to support the award-winning service rated good by the Care Quality Commission and accused bosses of ignoring concerns raised by staff. But the Trust Director of Mental Health and Learning Disability Services, Dr. Leslie Stevens, said the Trust was very aware of pressures on the service and had met team leaders and commissioners to try to resolve the issues. Speaking anonymously to the county press, one staff member said, "Managers consistently asked for support, but it was not forthcoming. We are a Cinderella service and our voice has not been heard. 5 years ago there were no vacancies, staff were valued, but there was a change in the management structure and managers were not given the support or training to run the service. The Trust was placed in special measures and could not recruit due to financial pressures. The last 12 months have been chaos." The person said around 1/3 of staff had taken long-term sickness absences due to stress and anxiety, which coupled with vacancies had crippled the service. Unable to cope with the demand, IRIS stopped taking new referrals for alcohol services in March. Since then, it is estimated around 180 people have been turned away. We have an incredibly dedicated team who are passionate about what they do. Despite the chaos, we have ensured client care has not suffered, said the staff member. But clients have not adequately been notified of the impending changes. The nature of recovery is fragile, and they are panicking about what will happen. The staff members said they were optimistic a new specialist provider with the necessary experience and infrastructure could turn the service around. The Trust said last week transferring IRIS to another provider as quickly as possible was the best option for the patients and staff. Dr. Stevens said, "We recognise the impact on GPs and individuals who would benefit from this service, and we take this very seriously. We have recruited new service manager to support the team, made improvements to the environment for staff and service users, and have made extensive reports to recruit staff to support and strengthen the team, who are all very skilled and have worked incredibly hard with great commitment to keep the service going. However, we have simply not been able to recruit the staff we need to fill the vacancies. The decision for the contract to be transferred will enable the alcohol service to start taking referrals again in the near future." Another staff member told the county press staff had struggled to cope with huge caseloads of 30 to 40 clients. It's not unheard of to go up to 60 cases. These are vulnerable, high-risk drug users. The Trust has left people out to dry and run the service into the ground, they said. Mental health services are already stretched, so you have high-risk alcohol-dependent people not getting the help they need. If you are alcohol dependent, you cannot just stop drinking. You're at risk of dying, basically. Jane Nevitt, chair of the union health branch, said the union was extremely disappointed, yet another NHS service was being outsourced.
The heading is Fantastic Mr. Fox, the Wily Thief. A Shanklin scoundrel is doing the rounds, pilfering goods from people's gardens. The suspect is a wily fox, and some of the stolen goods have been tracked down to his lair beside the railway track. The little red scamp has his patch in the Dracacean Gardens and Pierrellan Gardens areas. Michael Forrest is an artist who has been a victim of the fox's crimes. He said, "Everyone around where I live and work knows the fox, or at least knows of the fox. For some time now, neighbours have been losing items from their gardens, conservatories and sheds. One neighbour had single shoes taken and something else special to his children stolen from his back garden. When he went to where the fox lives, he found lots of shoes, clothes, bras and toys. Lots of other neighbours have either lost items or found items in their gardens. The fox has made quite a name for himself for his artful dodger ways." Michael, 39, uses face masks when in his workshop. This week a couple went missing. He said, "I worked out it was probably the fox. There is a hole in the hedge where I often see him coming through. I know he watches me while I work because I've taken photos of him. So I scaled the fence and went on a search for my lost masks. Luckily for me, I'm wily like a fox, so I was able to track them down after a few minutes of searching in the undergrowth. Unluckily, one was torn up by his sharp teeth, but the other was fine. Little red devil."
Rosemary Vineyard Homes plan is approved. Controversial plans to build approximately 140 homes at Rosemary Vineyard in Ryde have been given conditional approval by planning bosses, despite more than 100 letters of objection from locals. Some members of the Isle of Wight Council's Planning Committee also expressed concerns there were no easy public transport links to the new development, which incorporates Sharon Orchard and Rosemary Vineyard. The 14-hectare site currently has two access points, one off Smallbrook Lane and another off Ashy Road. The scheme was originally submitted for 197 units and a community building, but the number of dwellings was reduced and the community building removed from the scheme. The indicative layout shows 4 one-bedroom flats, 47 two-bedroom houses, 52 three-bedroom houses, 5 4-bedroom houses, 7 other houses and 25 self-build plots. All units would have 2 parking spaces. Ryde Town Council had objected to the application on grounds including access, traffic, lack of sustainable public transport and lack of clarity in the housing needs statement. Haven Street and Ashey Parish Council also objected on grounds of vehicle movements, drainage, flooding and overdevelopment. Councillors Jeff Brodie and Michael Lilly expressed fears a lack of public transport links to the site would leave people isolated and urged the committee to turn down the plans. Speaking at Tuesday's planning meeting, Councillor Brodie said, "This is an entirely unsustainable site in terms of access to public transport." However, members voted to approve outline permission for the development.
The article by Laurie Little covers the salute to Mary. Spitfires flew over Cowes in honour of Second World War pilot and trailblazer Mary Ellis on Monday. The flypast followed a memorial service at St Mary's Church and a gathering at Northwood House. Mary, who died in July aged 101, always said the Spitfire was her favourite aircraft. An estimated 600 people attended the church service, which heard many tributes to Mrs Ellis, a member of the Air Transport Auxiliary, ATA, when it was highly unusual to be a female pilot. Mary delivered Spitfires and bombers to the front line during the conflict, and those at the service were reminded she did this without radio, armed with only a map and a compass. Additionally, she often had to fly to hidden airfields and flew a wide variety of planes. Her work was vital to more than just the war effort, as she and her colleagues blazed the trail for today's generation of women RAF pilots. The service heard how she would arrive at the airfields and jump out of the plane, only to be asked where the pilot was. She was proud to say she was the pilot, although she was often not believed and a search of the aircraft ensued. Mrs Ellis is believed to have flown 1,000 aeroplanes during the war, before moving to the Isle of Wight in 1950 to take charge of Sandown Airport, becoming Europe's first female air commandant. She married Don Ellis, a fellow pilot, in 1961, and they lived in a home beside the runway at Sandown. Not one to shout about herself, it was decades before many people on the island realised who she was or what she had achieved. Following the service, a toast to the superb aviator was given at Northwood House by former Hover Travel MD and former Isle of Wight Lord Lieutenant Sir Christopher Bland. He is one of the few people to have been granted the freedom of the Isle of Wight. Mary was another. A pair of Spitfires flew overhead before the Mark 9 Spirit of Kent from Biggin Hill Heritage Hangar put on a spectacular display.
Care home slated by inspectors. Residents at an Isle of Wight care home were left for hours with nothing to do, and one, considered difficult, was restrained in bed every afternoon. Care Quality Commissioner CQC inspectors found 6 breaches of regulations at the Elms, Bembridge, during an unannounced inspection in May. They found staff had failed to report 4 safeguarding concerns to the CQC or local authority, leaving residents at risk of abuse or neglect. Hertford Care, which owns the home, said it had only acquired the Elms at the end of January and all its other homes were rated good or outstanding. Our residents are at the heart of everything we do. We have been working hard to address all concerns and bring the home to the standard we aspire to, said a spokesperson. A report revealed inspectors had to alert staff after spotting residents were at risk. One person tried to get up and walk, and then they needed assistance, and another, in a state of undress, was shouting for help. On 2 occasions, inspectors saw a resident in bed through an open door with the bedclothes down and no underwear on, exposing themselves. On both occasions they fetched staff. Residents said staff were caring, but inspectors found there were not enough of them to provide more than basic care. They did not always take time to engage with residents and sometimes treated them abruptly, even when helping them to eat or moving them. After inspectors said there was a lack of care and respect, dignity training was arranged for all staff. One person was put to bed every afternoon. Bed rails were in place so they could not get up. The curtains were drawn and there was no call bell. According to the report, they do this because the person is difficult to manage, makes a lot of noise, and tries to get up from their chair. The elms have been rated requires improvement across the board. Inspectors found few activities were provided. One resident said, "I could be much happier if I did not spend so much time sitting around doing nothing all day." Care plans sometimes included conflicting information. One resident's care plan said they should be resuscitated if they stopped breathing, but another section was marked "Do not resuscitate." However, inspectors said the home was clean and well maintained, equipment was regularly tested, and medicines administered safely. People's rooms were personalised with their own furniture and belongings. Birthdays were celebrated and families were invited to garden parties and coffee mornings. "This is a warm and friendly home with good care," said one family member. The Hertford Care spokesperson told the CQC had recognised its vision and values for the home. Since the inspection, we have implemented personal-centred software care plans. These will be actively used to both personalise and ensure the environment is safe and happy for all, said the spokesperson. All staff members have a robust and individual training plan which is regularly revisited. In addition to this, many have been involved in activities and workshops to enable them to further encourage residents to fully benefit from a wide range of hobbies and interests offered.
The heading is Rebuilds for Schools in North Wight. Plans to rebuild 2 Island primary schools have been given the green light by Isle of Wight Council planning bosses. Queensgate Foundation Primary School, East Cowes and Gurnard Primary School are set to receive new schools following approval of the schemes by members of the Planning Committee on Tuesday. The scheme, which is part of the government's Priority Schools Building Programme, proposes to replace the existing buildings with 2-storey, 420-place primary schools. In both cases, the new buildings are to be constructed on existing hard sports surfaces, allowing education to run as normal in the existing schools until the new build is complete, avoiding the need of temporary buildings. Whippingham Parish Council confirmed its support for a new school on the site, but voiced concerns about the proposed design. East Cowes residents also raised concerns regarding the aesthetics of the flat-surfaced, box-based design and worries about classroom sizes. Councillor Matt Price asked if the access road at the Gurnard site could be widened as parents picking up and dropping off their children caused horrendous mayhem. However, the committee heard that would not be possible without more expense being added to the project.
It's music to tug at your heartstrings. If you have a passion for music and haven't yet discovered Harp on Wight, you've been missing a treat. Throughout the 5 days of concerts, workshops and other activities taking place at various venues in Ryde, you'll be taken on a melodious journey through the diverse range of musical styles. This inclusive festival even offers absolute beginners the opportunity to play the harp for the first time. The Harp on Wight Festival 2018 runs from October the 26th until the 30th and celebrates its 5th birthday this year. Since it was established in 2014, the festival has attracted international harpists of the highest calibre to both perform and teach. These include Harp on Wight patron Anne Denholm and officially appointed harpist to HR8 Prince of Wales, who will again be involved in the festival's opening concert at All Saints' Church. After performing solo last year, Anne will return as part of the Hermes experiment, an ensemble of 4 young professional musicians who have a passion for contemporary and experimental music. The group consists of harp, clarinet and double bass, together with a soprano voice, and they will be performing a programme of early and Baroque music. At the start of this event, harpist and competition judge Fran Barsby will announce the results of the festival's junior and senior harp composition competitions and then perform the winning entries. The comprehensive concert and teaching programme includes a welcome return to the island for American lever harp specialist Lily Nell, who has appeared here on seven occasions previously. Expect dynamic performance from Nicolas Cadore from Brittany, as well as Paraguayan harp duo Sixto and Juanjo Corbelan, providing excitement and energy as Hermanos Corbelan, bringing a slightly different flavour and exciting addition to celebrate the event's 5th birthday is a special Sunday night concert by Indian sitar master Pandit Budhaditya Makaraji and table player Suman Nandi. Anyone with a liking for Ravi Shankar or the artists he influenced take note. Copies of the printed programme have been distributed island-wide. Please visit www.harpoonwight.co.uk or call 730-930 for further information or to book concerts or workshops. And we've now been told that we have to say goodbye to you. So it's goodbye from Mike.
And goodbye from Pauline.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Good morning, everyone. This is Barry reading the County Press.
Good morning, I'm Jan.
And we begin with the letters. There's one from Richard Steele of Shorewell. He says, recently I attended a meeting of the West Wight Regeneration Workshop run by the Isle of Wight Council. The meeting was held in the West Wight Sports and Community Centre. It struck me that this was a supreme irony. Here the council was talking about regeneration, yet it has abandoned a superb asset that already exists. The West Wight Sports and Community Centre no longer receives any financial support from the council, all funding having stopped in 2016. Without this funding, it is not clear how this facility, that is a vital community project serving West Wight and large areas beyond, can survive. It has excellent facilities and a dedicated staff and a team of volunteers to many of the people that use it. Its loss would cut an essential lifeline. The council appears to consider itself an expert in the financial field, borrowing large amounts of money to invest in schemes that have nothing to do with the Isle of Wight, and is happy to employ so-called experts for vast sums of money. Surely, with all this expertise, it can find the funds to continue to support the West Wight Sports and the Community Centre, just as it supports the facilities at Medina and the Heights.
And this is a letter from Bruce Overton of Portsmouth. Prison Action, he heads it. In 1918, members of the National Union of Police and Prison Officers took strike action in protest about pay and conditions. As a consequence, the government of the day introduced the Police Act of 1919, which outlawed police and prison officers from being members of a trade union. The police became a federation. The prison service was to become an association. Prison officers could not, and still cannot, legally take any action that may be contrived as a breach of prison discipline, as outlined in the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act of 1994. There comes a time, however, when good men and women say, enough is enough. In 1994, island prison officers were forced to take illegal industrial action in protest at the imposition of a derisory pay increase. Now, in 2018, once again, prison officers are having to take illegal industrial action, this time to express their concerns about health and safety in our jails. On the Isle of Wight, prison staff are no strangers to violence perpetrated by prison inmates. From the notorious and bloody prison riot at Parkhurst in 1969, and then Albany, through the decades, prison staff nationally and on the island have suffered the most appalling injuries at the hands of vicious, violent prison inmates. Whenever there are prison disturbances, all we hear from the government ministers are hand-wringing platitudes. Our political masters will ooze with praise about the work prison officers do behind those prison walls. And yet, when those hard-pressed men and women have to resort to taking illegal industrial action, those very same staff are treated as pariahs by this government. If taking industrial action inconveniences prison inmates for a few hours and embarrasses this crass government, then so be it.
And here's a letter headed Traffic Gridlock from David Williams of Newport. Following months of silence, it was to be hoped that Mr. Feeney and his associates had wearied of trying to persuade the island to support their various plans for a fixed link. Sadly, it would appear not to be the case, as we now are presented with a plan for a tunnel with an entry point at Whippingham. It would suggest Mr. Feeney spends little time on the island, as he seems to have little understanding of the difficulties many islanders face on a day-to-day basis negotiating the Coppins Bridge gyratory, possibly up to an hour, particularly on a wet summer's day. Can you imagine how much worse this would be with thousands of extra motorists arriving on the island just a few miles from Newport, only adding to a problem many on the island already believe is completely unacceptable? What happens, I wonder, when traffic entering the island through the only entry point to the island is unable to exit due to traffic gridlock in Newport? Would traffic be held on the mainland until it clears, or even worse, be stuck in the tunnel for an indeterminate period of time? Have the mainland authorities been made fully aware they would potentially have to deal with long queues of traffic waiting to access the tunnel? Has any thought been given as to how emergency help will arrive on the island in the event of a catastrophe if the tunnel is log-jammed? Presumably this is a problem that will be left to our council to sort out. Maybe one of the Wight Link cars ferries could be kept in cold storage. This is but the latest of a series of plans from Mr. Feeney for a fixed link. It surely cannot be a properly thought through proposal. Or if it is, what were all the others?
And from Tanya Katerina Rebel of Cowes. Recently, the Isle of Wight Council stated it strongly opposed a Southampton clean air zone, as it would harm tourism and business on the Isle of Wight. Apart from the bizarre situation where the Island Council seems to think it okay for polluting vehicles coming to the island to continue continue endangering Southampton's residents' health, am I right in concluding the Council, despite all the nice words at its environmental conference, is still putting the economy before the environment? If not, then I would like to see the following action urgently implemented. Number 1, a comprehensive island-wide, separate, commutable cycle network. Number 2, an island clean air zone, including car-free town centres. Number 3, chemical and pesticide-free and less frequent verge and grass cutting enshrined in the PFI contract. Number 4, a change to warm, maximum 2,700 K lighting across the island, also enshrined in the contract. Number 5, declaration of frac acidation and drill-free island. Number 6, encouragement of local food production up to 70% or beyond. Number 7, encouragement of hemp growing for plastic, paper, clothes and food, as well as house building material. Number 8, energy conservation and insulation in the form of carbon neutral housing stock with compulsory green roofs and or solar panels.
And from Jackie Willer of Northwood, as a Mountbatten nurse, I wanted to respond to the piece by Nigel Hartley on the 21st of September this year. I see firsthand every day the extraordinary strength of island families at the most challenging of times. It is a privilege for me to be able to care and support islanders facing the end of their lives, and I am so proud of how our team works together for our island community. We often talk about the Mountbatten way of doing things as members of staff. We don't see ourselves as particularly different, but we are very passionate about support, about finding innovative and new ways to support more people. We know not everyone can accept hospice care, and it's something that we are all passionate about changing. On the island, it is a sad fact 1 in 3 people can't or don't currently support. No one should die alone, and families should not be left to cope on their own. And this is why I'm looking forward to working in partnership with our colleagues at Countess Mountbatten Hospice in Southampton. It is clear this too is a much loved and respected local hospice, and I believe that working together we will find new ways to further strengthen the care and support that is offered, both to our island families but also to those on the mainland. As a fundraiser myself, taking part in many of Mountbatten's events, it is also reassuring to know any money raised on the island will stay on the island. I hope the island will be as proud as we are to have been invited to share our skills and experience in this way. And I, as well as my Mountbatten colleagues, look forward to supporting the Southampton team to reach out to the growing number of people who need our care.
And this letter is from Adrian Searle of Ryde. How very public-spirited of ProLink to revise the route of their proposed tunnel to the island. Constructing the link from Whippingham to a point near the M27 will, they rightly point out, having somehow not considered this before, avoid the traffic congestion that would have flowed, or more accurately, not moved at all, from the originally planned route between Arreton and Gosport, Fareham. No doubt the good folk on the Gosport Peninsula and elsewhere in Hampshire are breathing a huge collective sigh of relief. Good on you guys, but aren't you missing a trick here? Why not go the whole hog and build your tunnel all the way to Spaghetti Junction in Birmingham? Think of all the surface traffic congestion you could save between the West Midlands and the Isle of Wight. Of course, you might need to expand the tunnel to a 148-lane highway, or should that be a lowway? But it would surely be worth the small amount of additional cost to bring all that lovely traffic to Whippingham. And then we could promote our fair isle as the world's largest car park. And while you're at it, why not consider a short branch tunnel from Whippingham to Kazakhstan, thereby solving the Brexit conundrum at a stroke, since nobody from the UK would ever need to set foot in Europe again.
And headline here, vandals destroyed birch tree from Sue Lupton in Newport. Vandals have destroyed a young birch tree beside a footpath off Snowbury Road, Carisbrooke Meadows, Newport. As this photograph shows, the tree was one of several planted some years ago to enhance the area. The footpath is used by hundreds of people every week, including school children and parents, dog walkers, and residents walking from the Carisbrooke Meadows and Park Estates into the town centre. The lifespan of a birch tree is 140 years. I am shocked and angry someone in our community has chosen to deprive everyone else, now and in the future, of the pleasure of this tree.
Don't blame our dogs, from Joanne Sharman of Suffolk. I was very saddened to read the letter from Nicky and Pete Musprat, whose beloved Westie died recently of a virus. However, I was absolutely furious. The blame for this virus was laid firmly at the feet of visiting holidaymakers like myself, or the handful of thoughtless holidaymakers who choose not to clear up if their pet fouls a pavement. As a dog owner and a regular visitor to the island over the past 40 years, I was very offended, angry and upset to be blamed in this way, and would ask the question, where is the proof only holidaymakers' dogs cause this heartbreaking virus? Have they ever stopped an irresponsible dog owner who has not bothered to clear up after their dog and asked them where they came from? When we walk our dog, we never go out with our pockets full of poo bags, so we take exception to comments visitors are to blame. I assume from the comments every dog owner on the island always clears up after their dog. But if our recent walks on Culver Down are anything to go by, I think not. As most doggy doings look pretty much the same, I could not tell which came from an island dog and which came from a visiting canine. And as for all dogs visiting the island needing a certificate to prove their vaccinations are up to date, why on earth should we? I would be happy to do so, as I have a booklet which shows my dog's full vaccination record for the past 12 years. I assume if this was the case, then all island dogs leaving the Isle of Wight would need to provide the same before departing for the mainland.
And Nick Stewart, chairman of the Isle of Wight Lib Dems, good news for ferries, will offer a small limited subsidy to low-income families on their massive fares. Just a pity the government have rejected the petition to regulate ferry fares, given the duopoly controlling vehicle access to the island. The government market forces arguments are clearly spurious, as the MP acknowledged recently when he referred to the excessive borrowings and money extracted from the travelling public. Also a surprise, the Isle of Wight Council Conservatives come out in force to celebrate a ferry sticking plaster after removing limited council support for NHS patients. The carefully considered Lib Dem alternative budget offered a chance to support local NHS patients, and it's a pity the current council chose instead to throw large sums of money at a number of questionable areas, such as sports centre redevelopment. The Lib Dems will continue to press for a cross-party approach to ferry regulation and government support for ferry costs, as seen in Scotland and in the Scilly Isles.
From Carol Povey, Director of the National Autistic Society's Centre for Autism, London. The National Autistic Society is looking for people and organisations who've done something amazing for autistic children, adults or their families. Perhaps it's a teacher who has helped a child achieve something great, an autistic adult who has been campaigning tirelessly, or a business that has put a lot of effort into making their workplace accessible. If readers know of a person or organisation like this, please nominate them for our 7th Annual Autism Professionals Awards. We want to celebrate their achievements so we can improve understanding of autism and inspire others to make a difference too. Find out more at Autism and nominate by visiting www.autismprofessionalawards.org.uk.
And from Margaret Jackson of Brooke and Diana Conyers of Ryde. We were encouraged to read Jim Gibbons' article about assisted dying. We are also supporters of assisted dying, and like Jim, we think it should be an option for anyone, not just those who have only a few months to live. We support assisted dying for many reasons, but most importantly because it is a question of human rights. We believe that in contemporary society, when people can be kept alive almost indefinitely, the right to die is as important as the right to live. In our view, it is a pity our present MP, like his predecessor, is opposed to even the relatively limited idea of assisted dying for the terminally ill.
And now we move on to the Looking Back column in the County Press, and starting 100 years ago, September the 28th, 1918. Princess Beatrice visited an East Cowes art gallery in aid of the Church Army War Hut. The princess was received by Eleanor Viscountess Gort and Colonel Benson, who explained the war work of the Church Army. Also 100 years ago, the County Press reported there was more justification than ever for optimism regarding the military position of the Allies. The West Marshal Foch, after 2 months of unceasing progress, held the keys of a cumulative, irreversible victory. Recent eastern victories in Serbia and the Balkans had contributed to the optimistic view.
And 75 years ago, September the 25th, 1943, a double-fronted thatched cottage at the Green, Culbourne, was badly damaged by a fire. The outbreak was first noticed at the cottage, owned by the village blacksmith Mr. E. Downer, by neighbours. The occupiers and neighbours swiftly tackled the blaze with a stirrup pump. It was extinguished by the time the fire service had arrived. On his warmly welcomed return to England, Prime Minister Winston Churchill reported months of unbroken success for the Allies. He then warned that the bloodiest part of the war was yet to come, but the Allies could stand a strain under which the enemy would crack. The County Press reported that the island had made significant contributions to the war fund.
And 50 years ago, September the 21st, 1968, a new use for Newport Guildhall was announced. For centuries, the building was used as the civic centre of the ancient borough. The landmark, steeped in history and tradition, was turned into a central law court for the island's justice system. Lord Denning, the Master of the Rolls, performed the official opening ceremony. Work was due to commence on what was described as the most ambitious project undertaken by an island parish council. Freshwater Parish Council was set to transform 60 acres of scrub and brambles into an attractive natural national public park. The project to reform Golden Hill was planned to cost £750.
25 years ago, September the 24th, 1993, Medina Borough Councillors recommended all shops be allowed to open on Sundays. Members of the Environmental Services Committee narrowly voted for a total deregulation of Sunday trading, which would permit all shops to open on the Sabbath. Council leader Councillor Fletcher said, "We all know the present law on Sunday trading is an ass. It is unworkable and unenforceable." The future of 3 loss-making theatres was assured when councillors agreed to transfer the management of Sandown Pavilion and Shankling Theatre to a new company. Silver Fox Wrightstone Productions took over the 2 theatres. The same month the Tourism and Leisure Activities Committee agreed to lease the Ventnor Winter Gardens to the Town Council. It was revealed the 3 theatres faced total losses of more than £250,000.
And 10 years ago, a family ran for their lives from a burning car which exploded and was totally engulfed in flames just seconds later. Driver Terry Parkman shouted to family members, including his pregnant partner Helen Taylor, to get out of the car after hearing loud bangs followed by flames shooting from under the dashboard. The couple grabbed their niece and Helen's mother from the back seat and sprinted away from the burning vehicle on the roundabout by Tesco's in Ryde. And also 10 years ago, rescued island pooch Pip was in line to be declared the nation's top dog. The 10-year-old Jack Russell from Newport was nominated for the RSPCA's Dog of the Year award. Black and white Pip was left at God's Hills RSPCA Animal Centre when his owner died, before he was spotted by Margaret Crimmins, who had lost her own dog, Rusty, the year before. Margaret is pictured with Pip.
Now we have an article on the Isle of Wight's Lord Lieutenant Major General Sir Martin Wight, who stands down next year. It's headed "A Life of Service to the Queen and Country." When he was a schoolboy at Nettleston Primary and Sandown Grammar School, not even in his wildest dreams could young Martin Wight have imagined where his life would take him. Now at 74, he is preparing to retire as the island's Lord Lieutenant, following a distinguished and fascinating career. His name now reflects his status and the highest regard in which he is held by no less than the Queen. He is now Major General Sir Martin Wight, KCVO, CB, CBE, JP. So how does one go from finding academic work a challenge at school to ejecting Saddam Hussein from Kuwait, becoming head of the Royal Logistics Corps, responsible for 20,000 personnel, to being the Queen's representative on the Isle of Wight? I met Sir Martin at County Hall to find out. He was born in 1944 on the island to a family of Hertfordshire farmers on his mother's side, and on his father's side a New Church family since the 16th century, who later based themselves in Seaview, then Ashley. He presumed he would go into farming and didn't consider the army as a career until he joined the Army Cadets while at Sandown Grammar School. It wasn't a light bulb moment, I just thought I would give it a go, he said. But I immediately enjoyed the camaraderie of the military, and when two of my friends went to Welbeck College, a part of me wanted to leave the island. Not that I recognised that at the time. So I went too, and I was absolutely sold then. Welbeck is an army boarding school, which took children like me who had done O-levels and wanted to go into the technical side of the army. I did my A-levels there and progressed to Sandhurst. As an officer cadet at the military college, he found it hard work, but undeniably he had found his feet. He also found he had made friends and contacts for life. In 2019, it will be the 55th anniversary of our commission. We are still together, although some are not with us anymore, as we are all in our 70s. But it is a measure of what the army does for you, giving you friends for life. He was commissioned into the Royal Army Service Corps, later the Royal Corps of Transport, in the mid-1960s, and was stationed in Germany during the Cold War and the erection of the Berlin Wall. In 1966, he married Fiona, also an army officer, and the couple spent the next 15 years or so working and bringing up their family of 4 children in Germany. The army was their life, and they never had a posting they didn't enjoy in some way. The children boarded on the Isle of Wight as they got older, the 3 boys at Bembridge School and their daughter at Upper Chine. Postings in the Middle East followed for Sir Martin, as well as instructor roles, all the while never losing his island links and eventually buying a home here. By 1989, Sir Martin was a full colonel, working on logistic planning in Germany as the Berlin Wall came down, before he was asked to put a force together and lead the UK's logistic operation in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia in the First Gulf War in 1990 to 91. He was promoted to brigadier while he was leading the ejection of Saddam Hussein from Kuwait, and he was then awarded the CBE, which he received from the Queen at Buckingham Palace. He said, "It was a privilege to command people on that operation, and then have the huge privilege of my sovereign giving me that award." There were more career highlights to come. Sir Martin became a Major General and then the head of the Royal Logistics Corps, the largest corps in the army, which has the job of sustaining the entire army.
When he retired from the army in 1998, he again found himself in front of the Queen at Buckingham Palace, this time receiving a CB Companion Order of the Bath. People can take 3 guests to their investitures, so he and his wife asked the children to draw straws for the first trip to Buckingham Palace. Luckily, the second honour meant the other 2 children got their turn too. Sir Martin became a military advisor to Ernst and Young and Deloitte's, commuting to London from the island, but he was also enjoying getting more involved in island life. He was appointed Vice Lord Lieutenant in 1999 and became Lord Lieutenant in 2006. The role has existed for more than 4 centuries as a ceremonial presence on behalf of the monarch and a non-political focus for voluntary and charitable activity. It is an unpaid and unpolitical role and can be served until the age of 75. Hence Sir Martin stepping down in March 2019. His responsibilities include planning all royal visits to the island, and his office has worked hard to get us a lot of royal visitors. They keep a list of organisations, charities and businesses that would benefit from a royal visit, and have just in recent months welcomed Sophie, Countess of Wessex, Princess Anne and Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, to the island. So what was the highlight of all the royal visits over the years? He said, "It had to be the Queen's Diamond Jubilee visit in 2012. It was the end of July, on a hot day, and she came into Cowes on Donald Gosling's yacht Leander G. The people had lined the parade since 4 a.m. It was absolutely packed. Cowes Primary School sang her a song, and all the maritime organisations had stands at Cowes Yacht Haven. It was terrific. Robert Thompson put together a hamper of local produce, including elephant garlic, and the Queen joked she did not realise we had elephants on the Isle of Wight. When she left, she went to the Byles family home at Somerton to meet her helicopter, and they had quite rightly cut the grass for the occasion. But when the helicopter came down, it caused a grass storm, and the Queen from her car was laughing her head off. There's no news on who his successor will be. Sir Martin said he didn't know, and said even if he did, he wouldn't tell me. Well, you don't get where he has in life without being the soul of discretion and a safe pair of hands. He will still keep up his work as president of the SSAFA on the Isle of Wight, president of the Army Benevolent Fund, patron of the Royal British Legion, patron of Mountbatten, and involved in the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. So he is not seeking life in the slow lane. On November the 2nd, he will formally receive his knighthood at Windsor Castle. Anyone currently struggling at an island secondary school would do well to reflect on this story and realise life has barely begun. Just look at what happened to Sandown Grammar's Martin Wight.
Now we have Wight Memories. The article by Alan Stroud, Bringing in the Harvest. Until the middle of the last century, harvest time was a major event on the island. For a month, an army of casual labourers would invade the island's fields and meadows until all was safely gathered in. An entry in the Northwood School Diary in August 1886 confirms it was all hands to the pump. Quote, a small attendance the last 2 weeks as the children are kept at home to carry meals to the harvest field for their fathers. End of quote. And no wonder. The harvest took every pair of spare hands. It took 30 men a whole day to cut a 10-acre field of wheat by hand, a task that now takes a combine harvester barely 2 hours. And today there's no waiting for weeks for the threshing machine to come and separate the grain from the stalks. The combine does it all there and then, in one smug, effortless go. In a county press article in 1935, Catherine Hearn, a local historian, described a working day for the harvest workers at Heasley Manor in the 1830s. 30 men were taken on during the harvest. They began work at 4 a.m. with a pint of small beer called a dewlip. At 7 a.m. breakfast was served of pork, Isle of Wight cheese, homemade bread, and another pint of small beer. At 11 a.m. another pint was served, and at noon the dinner cart arrived in the field. At 4 p.m. the Nammet bread and cheese and small beer was also sent out into the field. Contrary to popular belief, the workers were not drunk all day. Small beer is a second, much weaker brew from the brewer's mash and had little of any alcohol in it. Some did manage to get a real drink. For many years, County Press editor Walter Sibbett wrote a column under the pen name Vectensis, featuring accounts of rural life. In 1952 he wrote, Arthur Williams of Gatcombe tells me the last man to brew real farmhouse beer in the island was the late Henry Orchard of Chale. Mr. Williams had some there in 1906 and tells me it was jolly good stuff. He says Albert Henton of Loverston Farm, Chillerton, can remember helping to brew farmhouse beer in a large tub which had 4 taps at different levels. Number 1 was Admiral, number 2 Knock Me Down, number 3 6 o'clock, and number 4 What the Little Pigs Wrestled For. The first was for dealers who called to get them into the good humour for a deal. Once the men in the harvest fields were given the wrong mixture, and they were all good for nothing by tea time. In 1961, Vectensis came face to face with the future. Last week I made my first close acquaintance with the combine harvester when I watched Mr. Scott Blake and his men cutting a field of barley at Blackwater. My mind went back to my boyhood when I was thrilled to lead the trace hoss while the sheaves were loaded onto the wagon, and when the mowers, wielding their scythes with a regular swish, laid the cut corn in neat swathes and at intervals stopped at the cry of "wet" to draw their whetstones and strike a sweet ringing note as they put a keener edge on their blades. Today's changes left me with a nostalgia for the more peaceful, more musical harvesting of yore.
In 1983, Colin Fairweather and I made recordings of islanders, then in their 80s, talking about their childhood and working lives. Among them was my wife's grandmother, Lily Young, who, at 13, started work as a maid at Dotton's Farm, Gurnard. Harvest time at Dotton's was wonderful, she said. There'd be about 30 men to cut it, and then it was made up into great big ricks to store it. And then, a month or so later, when it had dried out, the thresher would come. Oh, lovely sound it was. Course, the rats used to get into the rick, and when they came rushing out, we'd hit 'em on the head. Some of the mice used to escape, but the dogs was pretty hot on 'em. Fred Long, well-known Porchfield farmer, told us in 1984, "You never had no trouble to get haymakers those days. Soon as the grass cutters started rattling, there was about 4 blokes looking over the gate. Any chance of a job? We'd get the hay in with them and take it in the rickyard and then make ricks of it. You'd get 4 or 5 hay ricks. Some of them was 20 yards long and about 8 yards wide. They was all in a line through the rickyard. Used to look a treat, all thatched in. Perhaps you finished harvest first and somebody next to you still had somewhere out. Well, you went and helped them get it in, so it didn't get wet. But I think today they'd be more likely to laugh at you if you got some corn out before they're getting wet. There ain't the sort of camaraderie between farmers as what there was in my young days. You was all the peasant, farmer type, born and bred to it. You never had businessmen trying to farm, and there wasn't anybody rushing about as if they was going to die tomorrow morning about 8 o'clock, like they do now on farms. Quite what Fred would think of farming today, we can only guess.
Now we have My View with Jonathan Young. The clerk to Newport Parish Council has resigned and has in the process put a new set of wheels on a bandwagon which has been rolling around the island for some time. Daniel Faulkner had issues with the conduct of 2 councillors. In one case, the parish council chairman, Jeff Brodie, brokered an informal rapprochement. In the other case, that was not quite possible. Daniel quit, observing that he valued his dignity higher than the convenience of employment. The vacancy was advertised on page 61 of the county press. And on page 61, it may well have stayed, but for Daniel's decision to copy his perfectly dignified thought to all of his fellow clerks across the island. Within 24 hours, the keyboard warriors had declared a major incident. The reply all button was taking a hammering, and worst of all, people who should have known better, if only out of respect for the laws of defamation, were adding bells and whistles to what Daniel had actually said, without the apparent benefit of any facts. One outrageous extrapolation in particular stands out. Mrs. Valerie Taylor is the clerk to Whippingham Parish Council and the National Director of the Society of Local Council Clerks, in whose island branch she is active. This is a major problem in our island, and if it continues it will be the end of local democracy, as no one will wish to be a clerk and mob rule will have prevailed. Thundered Vale. She also wants MP Bob Seeley to raise the issue in Parliament, adding, "Any acts of bullying you have experienced, let us know so a good dossier can be put together. Bullying in the workplace is a very serious matter. Council clerks, like all other employees, are entitled to be protected from it, but bullying is not a word which should be thrown around lightly. The basis on which Daniel Faulkner is alleging bullying is unclear. Rudeness, for example, needs to pass a certain threshold to qualify, and those of us not witnesses to it are in no position to judge. In any event, he has commended the new post to whoever succeeds him, and will stay in position to ensure a smooth handover, the epitome of a professional saviour." The island SLCC was meeting to discuss the slide into mob rule as the CP went to press. Many of its more level-headed members were staying away, dismayed at the lurch into a parallel universe, where elsewhere on the island the paid staff see themselves, rather than the elected members, as the custodians of local democracy, where almost any criticism, internal as well as external, of what a council does is taken as an attack on its clerk, so that, conveniently, it can be discussed in private as a staffing matter, the drawbridge pulled up and dissenting voices silenced by the deployment of letters which typically begin, "As an employer, insert name of town or parish council, has a legal duty of care, obligations and responsibilities towards and for our staff." Likewise, new blood on some of our other councils find themselves treated as the enemy, simply for questioning past decisions and challenging traditional ways of doing things, particularly around the use of social media. This is the antithesis of local democracy, and may well not be what Daniel Faulkner was driving at when he gave vent to his irritation at events in Newport. Nonetheless, the rift between a few paid officers and elected councillors is a serious problem, and a growing one, and our MP, if and when he gets Val Taylor's dossier, should pause and ask himself where the threat to local democracy is actually coming from.
And from Alan Marriott, "We should plan for our own deaths. The fortune cookie is usually a joyous thing at the end of a Chinese meal, offering notes of ancient wisdom which generally bring joy and hope. However, the one I was given at Mountbatten, the new name for our island hospice, offered a more sobering question. To be fair, it is designed to, and mine asked me, where would you prefer to die? Something I hadn't really given a lot of thought to. I, like many people, don't really want to consider when the Grim Reaper will come calling, but the message from Mountbatten is that it is something we should all be planning for. So, when on Saturday I went to visit the widow of a friend who had died at the age of 62 in Mountbatten earlier this month, it was something we chatted about. She told me that knowing the end was coming, he had prepared his own funeral, got his affairs in order, and generally left things neat and tidy. Although his death was still as distressing as any departure must be, at least they knew the plans. I have not quite reached the big 6-0, but I could shuffle off the mortal coil at any time, I guess. And what have I done to prepare for it? Absolutely zilch. I don't have a will, I have no preferences for burial or cremation, and only I know I want everyone to sing Bruce Springsteen's Thunder Road at my wake. The message in Mountbatten's Advance Care Plan is that it spares your nearest and dearest having to guess what your wishes are. Without wishing to tempt fate, I am in reasonable health, but we don't always know what is coming round the corner. And, as the Advanced Care Plan says, planning is a normal part of life, and the difficult questions that come with a life-limiting condition, such as cancer or motor neurone disease, are best tackled early on, so your loved ones are not left without the power to make those decisions in your stead. Despite all the talk of celebrations of life, etc., death is a miserable business, particularly for those left behind. So, as my friend did, I think it is up to us all to put our affairs in order, so that loved ones don't have to endure that stress on top of everything else. And for the record, I want to die with the best care pain relief. Certainly not at home, where my death would be a permanent scar on the house for those left behind. But to lighten the mood, I leave you with this from Winston Churchill. I am ready to meet my Maker. Whether my Maker is prepared for the ordeal of meeting me is another matter.
And on that note, this is best wishes from Barry.
And goodbye from Jan.
This is the BBC.
This is In Touch, the magazine programme for people like me who are blind or partially sighted. I'm Peter Wight. Thanks for downloading this week's edition. Good evening. Tonight, a legal breakthrough for sufferers of an eye condition affecting tens of thousands of people. And a fond farewell to a good friend of the programme, scriptwriter and star in his own right, Dennis Norden, who died last week. But first, a High Court decision about two drugs could be about to save the NHS hundreds of millions of pounds. It was almost exactly 11 years ago that this programme first drew attention to the huge disparity between the costs of two drugs which could both be used to treat the same eye disease. Lucentis and Avastin are both used in treating what's known as wet AMD, a form of macular disease which threatens the sight of around 40,000 people a year in the UK. But while a dose of Lucentis costs the NHS several £100s, a dose of Avastin could be had at around £30. But doctors who wanted to prescribe this cheaper drug were told they'd have to do this at their own risk because no licence had been sought for its use in the eye. The reasons? There were still suspicions that there were side effects connected with Avastin used in the eye which could not be risked. But several trials comparing the two drugs found that the cheaper Avastin is as effective and safe as the more expensive Lucentis, an opinion shared now by NICE, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. But Avastin is still not licensed for use in the eye in the UK. Now, two drug companies, Novartis and Bayer, who market Lucentis and another drug, Eylea, respectively, went to the High Court to prevent 12 clinical commissioning groups in the North East from prescribing Avastin for the eye. But their case has failed. In a decision which some say will save the NHS hundreds of millions of pounds, the judges ruled that health authorities can provide Avastin on grounds of cost, and they can cite NICE's ruling that it is safe and effective for use in the eye. Hasib Ahmad is Managing Director of Novartis Pharmaceuticals in the UK. I asked him why they brought this case.
I think we brought this case because we don't see that the policy that was being proposed by these 12 commissioning groups, so these NHS managers in the northeast of England, we didn't believe and do not believe that it's in the interest of patients. So this is almost an unprecedented situation where...
But they wanted to provide a drug cheaply. That's not a terrible thing to want to do, is it?
What is being proposed is that patients, for the first time, are having to accept an unlicensed medicine that hasn't been through the same regulatory scrutiny as licensed medicines when licensed medicines are available. Now, within the UK, any of us who are consumers of the National Health Service, we have a right within the NHS Constitution to medicines that have been approved by NICE.
But why hasn't Avastin been licensed for use in the eye in the UK when it's been used all over the world for the last 10 years?
Avastin is not a Novartis medicine, so I can't comment on the commercial strategies of other companies.
But you have been very supportive of the idea of it's not being used, so I can assume that you're in agreement with the fact that it isn't licensed.
We're very supportive that patients should have choice and physicians should also have choice. So regulation is there for a reason. What we're seeing in this case is that potentially both hospital trusts, physicians and patients will be put under pressure to accept a medicine that hasn't been through the same regulatory standards.
But isn't part
that
of
licensed
choice
medicines go through.
Isn't part of choice affordability? And the problem for the NHS, which you know is very stretched, is that it's faced with a very expensive drug and can't use a much cheaper one.
Well, I think when it comes to cost, as I'm sure you're aware, you've been following this case for many years. Medicines which are approved by NICE, which the current licensed medicines are, they are demonstrated to be cost effective. As I'm sure you know, these innovations, the current licensed medicines over the last 10, 11 years, have reduced the rate of blindness in the UK by a half. That's something that should be valued and has been recommended by NICE and is demonstrated to be cost effective.
But NICE has now accepted that Avastin is as effective as Lucentis.
So NICE are not a regulatory authority. So the MHRA, or the competent authority in the UK, that's our licensing authority in the UK, they look at the efficacy, safety and quality of medicines. So they get thousands of pages of dossiers to show all the clinical studies and all the robustness of the studies that we've done. And it's for them to decide whether products are licensed. So it hasn't been through the full NICE process. It happens to be a statement which is based on consensus opinion of clinicians. It's also stated in the NICE guidelines that they do not recommend the use of unlicensed bevacizumab.
But the problem is that Avastin hasn't been through any of these processes because nobody's ever sought a licence for it. So it's not surprising that it hasn't been licensed or tested in the formula that you want to see.
So I can only really comment on what has been tested and what has gone through the regulatory scrutiny and gone through the competent authorities. So the regulatory authorities are there to look at efficacy, safety and quality. And the only medicines that have gone through that, the required standards, are current licensed therapies.
But you brought the case in order to stop Avastin's use by this group of health authorities, which indicates that you're in support of it not being licensed, effectively. You're using the fact that it's not being licensed as an argument.
The judgment from last week stated that this clinical commissioning group, so these NHS managers, having a policy in place is not unlawful. The judge determined that it's okay to have the policy. What the judge also said is implementation of the policy is the responsibility and the accountability of hospital trusts and clinicians to determine whether it is lawful to implement. So, if you like, the hot potato has been thrown from these NHS managers to the hospital. Also within the case, it's proposed that then patients would have to consent to treatment. So if you look at that chain of events, you see the hot potato and the responsibility being thrown onto patients now. Patients, particularly patients who are in a very stressful situation, who are faced with the potential of losing their sight, they should not be put in a position where they may have to take an unlicensed medicine.
You brought the case on the basis that it's not licensed. And obviously what we're arguing about here is, should it be licensed on the grounds of its effectiveness, at least? And you don't argue now, do you, with the effectiveness of Avastin?
I think the thing that we need to focus on in the case, and I think it's not been reported, certainly at the weekend, there are, I think, lots of easy headlines. It's very easy to make a headline about potential savings in the NHS. What hasn't been commented on is the pressure potentially that could be put onto patients, but also what has not been reported on. When we look at our licensing authority in the UK, it is very much the envy of the world. One of the great things we have within
can they look at it if the license hasn't been requested?
If I just finish, one of the great things that we have within the UK, it's as well as our NHS, is the regulatory system. The MHRA is very much the envy of the world. They have the competency when it comes to looking at efficacy, safety and quality of medicines. They look at various dossiers to suggest that NHS managers can do the same. So we should all be concerned about this judgment.
Do you lie awake at night ever wondering that some people might be losing their sight because doctors are being heavily discouraged from using a perfectly effective drug?
These licensed medicines that have been available for the last 10, 11 years, patients have been receiving them. They do have good access in the UK to these medicines. That has reduced the registered rate of blindness by 50%. What really concerns me is the precedent this could set, not just within ophthalmology, but for patients right across the board.
Are you going to appeal?
So we're going to assess all the options available to us, and clearly appealing is one of those options.
Hasib Ahmad, Managing Director of Novartis Pharmaceuticals UK. Well, we spoke to the other company involved in the court case, Bayer. They said no one was available to speak to us. Professor Philip Rosenfeld is an ophthalmologist and teaches in the University of Miami. And he was crucial in discovering the effectiveness of Avastin in the eye. Well, we've been following these developments for a decade now. And he told me how we got to this point.
Well, back in the early part of the 2000s, we were the lead investigators looking at a molecule from Genentech called Rufab. It's now known as Lucentis. And at that time, Rufab was showing extraordinary effects on wet macular degeneration patients. It was at that time that I went into the literature and I discovered there really was very little difference between what is now Lucentis and Avastin. They were both derived from the same mouse monoclonal antibody. So I approached Genentech with an idea of using Avastin systemically as an intravenous infusion. The idea was that if we could infuse the drug, then we could treat patients without having to stick a needle in their eye. Moreover, since wet macular degeneration is often found in both eyes, a single intravenous infusion would be able to treat both eyes. Genentech at the time wasn't interested in investigating Avastin for wet macular degeneration. So we raised our own funds from grateful patients, and we designed a study looking at systemic intravenous Avastin for wet macular degeneration.
Were you concerned, though, about testing this in the eye? You know, that's not the use that it had been put to in the past. So wasn't there an element of risk just in the testing process in the first place?
Well, we didn't start by testing the drug in the eye. We were using it systemically, intravenously, much like Avastin is used in cancer patients. And what we found was, systemically, the drug worked extraordinarily well. Our patients were delighted with the results. And in many ways, the systemic intravenous use of Avastin was better than injecting it into the eye. But shortly after we started the study, some side effects of systemic high-dose Avastin were discovered, and there was a black box warning placed on Avastin when given in a high dose intravenously. And when we presented our data, people were very excited with the systemic use of Avastin, but ophthalmologists in general don't want to deal with the side effects, which were high blood pressure, heart attack, and stroke. So then we started exploring other ways of delivering Avastin in patients with wet macular degeneration, and in doing the calculations, we realized that if we injected the same volume of Avastin as we were injecting of Lucentis into the eye, we would be giving the patient the same amount of drug that would be effective in the eye at a fraction of the cost.
That was Professor Philip Rosenfeld. So, with Avastin now apparently cleared for use by the NHS, isn't this a cause for celebration at the Macular Society, which represents hundreds and thousands of patients? Kathy Yelf is the Society's chief executive, and she doesn't think it's that simple. I asked her what she thought of the judgment.
Our reaction is a degree of ambivalence, to be perfectly honest. Our view really is that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Will this actually help age-related macular degeneration patients?
You see, people might be a bit surprised at the caution with which you've answered that question, because a lot of people are kind of jumping for joy. And what they will say is, surely, if people have been asked to benefit from a drug which is more expensive than another drug, then a lot of money must have been wasted, and that money could have been spent on people with visual impairment.
Well, hypothetically, that is true. These drugs have been sort of head-to-head for a decade or more. And the argument has changed over the years. To begin with, I think the argument was that Avastin was not as good as Lucentis and then Eylea, and I don't think that argument holds sway anymore. I think there have been enough trials that show the drugs are equally effective and equally safe. And then people pointed to the problem of so-called backdoor regulation of drugs, that this is not licensed officially for use in eyes, and that there is certainly merit in upholding the drug regulatory framework because it protects patients from unlicensed and untested and untried drugs. This isn't an untested or an untried drug, though. So yes, it is right that hypothetically, had we had Avastin from the get-go, then there would have potentially have been a lot more money available in the system. What we don't know, of course, is whether that money would actually have been spent in eye care or whether it would have disappeared off to other specialties. Certainly, I can understand completely why the NHS wants to do this. I mean, there is a very large discrepancy in the costs of the drugs. But in terms of AMD, the benefits there, well, it depends on whether it stays in AMD, the savings.
The drug company Novartis, don't they have a point there that we do actually need very tough rules to ensure that drugs have been tested to destruction before we take them?
Well, yes, they do. I mean, it is very important. Drug regulation, as it's known in the modern world, came in after the thalidomide scandal. And so everybody can see that there are very good reasons why drugs need to be very tightly regulated. Mrs. Justice Whipple's judgment is very long and very complex. But it seems in the summary that she is suggesting that the European Medicines Agency is not necessarily the only arbiter on what is a safe and efficacious drug, and that there are other elements of, for example, clinical commissioning groups, or NICE, for example, in the UK that could also be competent to make those decisions.
So, I mean, the people listening to this, of course, who we would be most concerned about are patients, existing ones and maybe patients of the future. And obviously the question to you is, what will this judgment mean to them?
The difference it will make to patients will depend entirely on what the NHS decides to do with that spending. So there is one immediate benefit, which is that under the existing licensed drugs, the regulation is that people who have better vision, that is to say, in any one eye better than the legal driving limit, can't currently be treated. They are sent away and told to come back when their eyesight gets worse. Now, all the evidence shows that the sooner you treat somebody with wet AMD, the better their vision will stay over the years to come. And it is nonsense to send them away and let their vision get worse. So that rule won't apply if Avastin is used, and so we would say that everybody who presents with active wet AMD at a hospital clinic should be treated regardless of how good their vision is. That's the first thing, and that could be an immediate benefit. And frankly, it doesn't matter what you jab into their eye. If they don't get it at the right time, they're going to lose their sight anyway. So we must have that investment back in AMD clinics.
Kathy Yelf of the Macular Society. And finally today, the Society has just lost one of its great friends. And so have we. Dennis Norden, one of radio and TV's finest comedy scriptwriters, has died. He became a particular favourite on this programme after his sight began to fail about 10 years ago, coping with his trademark wry humour. At the top of his game as he approached 90, he joined us in front of a large audience to mark In Touch's 50th anniversary. And tonight, we're going to leave you with Dennis.
I first noticed things were going wrong, actually, when I found myself banging into people all the time. And it occurred to me on the way here that I was a collider well before that Hedron thing started. But I was, at the time, when the sight degenerated and I found out that I had macular degeneration, which is an interesting thing because when you tell a lot of people, they don't get it first time. And actually, after that interview that we did, Peter, I got in a taxi and the driver said, I heard you with that, Peter Wight. He said, my brother-in-law's got that muscular desperation.
We had Eric Sykes, who also has this, and he talked throughout the whole interview about muscular disciform. So yeah. There are lots of versions of it.
We were in the RAF together, Eric and I, in the same tent at one time. So we've known each other a long time, and he's got age-related macular degeneration as well. And we had to do a thing together where he was on a platform and I had to make an entrance. And he got up and said, and they made it out, Dennis and Orne, so, and he got up and stretched out his hand and said, Dennis, and I came on and said, Eric, and we walked right past him.